The doors of Serena Cole's wedding hall opened at the worst possible moment. Guests turned. Conversations stopped. A man in a simple black suit walked in calm, steady, out of place. Serena smiled, then froze. It was Daniel Wright, the poor cleaner she had invited as a joke. 3 weeks ago, she laughed while inviting him, certain he would never come, certain he would stay invisible where people like him belonged. But today, Daniel showed up, and the question was no longer who he was. It was who would be humiliated now. Daniel Wright pushed the cleaning cart across the 42nd floor of Cole Dynamics every night at 9:30. The hallways were empty by then. Most employees had gone home hours earlier. Only security remained, nodding at him from behind their desks, their attention already back on their phones. He preferred it this way. No one watched him. No one asked questions. No one expected him to explain why a man his age 34 was emptying trash bins in a building full of people half his age earning 10 times his salary. Daniel didn't mind the work itself. It was honest. It paid rent. It kept food on the table for Lucas. That was enough. He cleaned methodically, floor by floor, office by office. Glass desks wiped clean. Carpets vacuumed in straight lines. Trash collected. Recycling sorted. He moved through the spaces like a ghost, touching everything, noticed by no one. The building managers never complained. Daniel was reliable in a way that made him forgettable. He had learned long ago that invisible was safer than noticed. At 11:15, Daniel clocked out. He walked 6 blocks to the bus stop, rode 20 minutes to the south end, then walked another 4 blocks to the apartment. The lights were still on. Mrs. Chen opened the door before he could knock. She was 72, gray-haired, patient in ways Daniel could never repay. "Lucas finished his homework," she said quietly. "He ate the soup. He wanted to wait up for you." Daniel handed her $40. "Thank you." She waved it off like she always did, but took it anyway. They both knew she needed it. Inside, Lucas was asleep on the couch, a library book open on his chest. Daniel lifted him carefully, carried him to the bedroom, pulled the blanket over him. Lucas stirred. "Dad, I'm here. Did you have a good day?" Daniel looked at his son's face, small, trusting, unaware of how hard things were. "Yeah, buddy, I did." Lucas smiled and turned over. Daniel stood there for a moment, watching him breathe. This was the only thing that mattered. Not the job. Not the building. Not the people who walked past him every day without seeing him. Just this. He went to the kitchen, made himself a sandwich, sat at the table in the dark. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, a cramped kitchen, a living room that doubled as Daniel's sleeping space. The furniture was second-hand. The walls needed paint. The faucet dripped no matter how many times he tightened it. But it was theirs. Daniel had been raising Lucas alone since his wife left 4 years ago. She had walked out one morning with a suitcase and an apology he didn't ask for. He hadn't heard from her since. At first, it had been overwhelming. Lucas was 3 then, still learning to talk, still needing everything. Daniel didn't know how to braid hair or cook anything beyond pasta. He didn't know how to answer questions about why Mommy wasn't coming back. But he learned. He learned to wake up at 5 to pack lunches. He learned which foods Lucas would actually eat. He learned to read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. He learned to be both parents, even when he had no idea what he was doing. Lucas never asked for much. A new toy, a trip to the zoo, a birthday party with his friends. Daniel gave what he could. It wasn't always enough. But it was something. He finished his sandwich, washed the plate, turned off the light. Tomorrow would be the same as today. Wake up, get Lucas ready, drop him at school, sleep a few hours, pick Lucas up, make dinner, go to work, come home. Repeat. Daniel didn't dream of wealth. He didn't imagine a life where he wore suits and made decisions in boardrooms. He just wanted Lucas to have more than this. More than a father who came home smelling like disinfectant. more than an apartment where the heat didn't always work in winter, more than a childhood built on "we can't afford that right now." Daniel lay down on the couch, pulled the thin blanket over himself, closed his eyes. He didn't know that in 3 weeks, his entire world would shift. He didn't know that the woman who signed his paychecks would offer him something meant to humiliate him, and he didn't know that he would accept it anyway. Serena Cole stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her office, looking down at the city below. From this height, everything looked small, manageable, under control. She liked it that way. Cole Dynamics was her creation. 10 years ago, she had taken a failing tech consultancy and turned it into one of the most profitable firms in the region. 300 employees, 12 floors, contracts with half the Fortune 500. She had built it all through discipline, precision, and an unwillingness to accept anything less than excellence. People respected her, feared her, sometimes, but mostly respected her. Serena had built her reputation on precision. She didn't tolerate mistakes. She didn't accept excuses. She hired the best, paid them well, and expected excellence in return. Those who couldn't deliver didn't last long. Her office reflected that philosophy: minimalist, clean, expensive without being ostentatious. A glass desk with nothing on it but a laptop and a single pen. White walls, black furniture, a view that reminded everyone who entered that they were standing in the presence of someone who had climbed very high. Serena's assistant knocked softly before entering. "Your 4 o'clock is here," Patricia said. Serena didn't turn around. "Send them in." The meeting was routine. A prospective client, nervous and eager to impress. Serena listened, asked pointed questions, made no promises. By 4:30, they were gone. She didn't think about them again. That evening, Serena stayed late going over wedding details with Patricia. The ceremony was 3 weeks away. Every detail had been planned months in advance. Venue, catering, flowers, music, nothing left to chance. She was marrying Connor Hastings, a corporate attorney with the right background, the right connections, the right ambitions. Their engagement had been efficient. No drama, no surprises. Just 2 successful people agreeing that their lives aligned. Serena didn't believe in fairy tales. She believed in partnerships that made sense. "Guest list is finalized," Patricia said, scrolling through her tablet. 218 confirmed. "Good." Photographer confirmed. Videographer confirmed. String quartet confirmed. Serena nodded. "Anything else?" Patricia hesitated. "The seating chart. A few people are concerned about where they're placed. Let them be concerned." Serena had no patience for status games. She had arranged the seating based on professional value, not personal feelings. If someone didn't like their table assignment, they could choose not to attend. As Patricia left, Serena glanced out the window again. The cleaning crew was starting their rounds. She could see them moving through the offices below, pushing carts, emptying bins. Serena had never learned their names. They were part of the building's infrastructure, necessary but invisible, like the ventilation system or the elevator mechanics. You didn't think about them unless something went wrong. She turned away, gathered her things, left for the evening. Her driver was waiting downstairs. The car was warm, quiet, insulated from the cold outside. As they pulled away from the building, Serena saw one of the cleaning crew standing at the bus stop. A man in a worn jacket, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. She didn't recognize him. She didn't try. By the time the car turned the corner, she had forgotten he existed. 3 weeks before the wedding, Serena held a small gathering in her office. It wasn't official, just her and 5 senior managers discussing final logistics over wine and catered appetizers. The kind of casual networking that reinforced hierarchy without acknowledging it. Rachel Simmons, VP of Operations, raised her glass. "To Serena. May your marriage be as successful as your quarterly earnings." Everyone laughed. Serena smiled. "That's setting a high bar. You've never failed to meet one yet," said Marcus Trent, head of finance. The conversation drifted. Wedding venues, honeymoon destinations, the exhausting process of managing vendors. At least you won't have to worry about uninvited guests, Rachel said. 200 people is already generous. Too generous, Serena replied. Half of them are Connor's law school friends. I've met maybe 10%. Marcus leaned back. You could always pad the numbers. Invite some unexpected guests. Like who? I don't know. Make it interesting. Invite someone completely random. Rachel laughed. Like the mailroom guy? Or the cleaning crew, Marcus added, grinning. Imagine their faces. The others chuckled. Serena tilted her head. That's actually not a bad idea. The room went quiet. You're joking, Rachel said. Why not? It would be memorable. Marcus raised his glass. You're serious. Why shouldn't I be? We talk about inclusivity all the time. Community. Coal dynamics as a family. Serena's tone was light, amused. What better way to prove it than inviting everyone? She stood, walked to the door, opened it. Down the hallway, Daniel was emptying a trash bin outside one of the conference rooms. Serena called out. Excuse me. Daniel looked up. She gestured. Could you come here for a moment? He set down the bin, walked toward her office. His expression was neutral, unreadable. Serena smiled. What's your name? Daniel Wright. Daniel. How long have you worked here? 3 years. 3 years. Serena nodded thoughtfully. You do good work. The building always looks perfect. Thank you. I'm getting married in 3 weeks, Serena continued. We're having a ceremony at the Royal Ashford Hotel. I'd like to invite you. Daniel didn't react. Behind Serena, Rachel was biting her lip to keep from laughing. It's formal, Serena added, but I'm sure you'll find something appropriate to wear. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Serena blinked. You will? Well. She smiled wider. Wonderful. I'll have my assistant send you the details. Daniel nodded, turned, walked back to his cart. Serena closed the door. The room erupted in laughter. Oh my God, Rachel said. He actually accepted. He won't show, Serena replied, sitting back down. He's just being polite. Marcus shook his head, still grinning. That was amazing. Even if he does show, Serena said, it'll be harmless. 1 extra seat. No one will even notice. They moved on to other topics. But Rachel leaned over to Marcus and whispered. She really thinks he won't come, Marcus whispered back. Of course he won't. Would you? Outside, Daniel returned to his work. His hands were steady as he tied the garbage bag, replaced the liner, moved to the next bin. But inside, something had shifted. He had heard the laughter. He had seen the looks. He knew exactly what this was, and he had accepted anyway. That night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table long after Lucas had gone to bed. The invitation sat in front of him. Patricia had sent it via internal mail the next day, just as Serena promised. Thick cardstock, gold lettering, a formal request for the honor of his presence. It was almost funny. Daniel had been invited to plenty of things in his life. Birthday parties when he was a kid, a high school graduation he never attended. His own wedding, which felt like a lifetime ago. But this was different. This wasn't an invitation. It was a test. Serena Cole wanted to see if he would embarrass himself. Show up in the wrong clothes, say the wrong things, prove that people like him didn't belong in places like that. Or maybe she expected him not to show at all. To quietly accept the humiliation and stay invisible, the way he always had. Daniel turned the invitation over in his hands. He could throw it away, pretend it never happened. No one would blame him. But then he thought about Lucas. What would his son learn if Daniel spent his whole life avoiding difficult moments? If he taught him that the safest thing to do was keep your head down and hope no one noticed you? Lucas was 7. He was watching everything Daniel did, learning how to be a man by watching his father. And Daniel didn't want to teach him that hiding was the answer. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the street below. It was late. The streetlights cast long shadows. A few cars passed, their headlights cutting through the dark. Daniel wasn't angry. He wasn't planning revenge. He just didn't want to be afraid anymore. Not of people like Serena Cole. Not of rooms full of strangers. Not of the possibility that he might not belong. He had spent 3 years cleaning that building. He had worked every holiday, every weekend, every night when most people were home with their families. He had earned the right to walk through those doors. Maybe not in the way Serena meant. Maybe not for the reasons she expected. But he had earned it. Daniel made his decision. He would go. Not to prove anything to Serena. Not to make a scene. Just to show Lucas and himself that dignity wasn't something you had to ask permission for. Daniel didn't tell anyone about the wedding. Not Mrs. Chen. Not his co-workers. Not even Lucas, who would have asked 100 questions Daniel didn't know how to answer. Instead, he planned quietly. He saved $20 from each paycheck. It wasn't much, but over 2 weeks, it added up to something meaningful. On a Saturday afternoon, while Lucas was at a friend's house, Daniel took the bus downtown to a second-hand clothing store. The shop was cramped and smelled faintly of mothballs. Racks of suits lined the walls, most of them outdated or slightly worn. Some had been there for years, waiting for someone who needed them. Daniel searched for half an hour before finding something that fit. A black suit, single-breasted, plain but clean. The fabric was a little shiny from age, but it didn't have any stains or tears. The clerk, an older man with reading glasses, looked him over. "Wedding? Yeah. Yours?" The man nodded, didn't ask more questions. $45 for the suit. I can throw in a white shirt for another 10. Daniel counted out the bills. At home, he hung the suit in the closet, behind his work clothes where Lucas wouldn't see it. Every night, he looked at it before leaving for work. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't new, but it was clean, presentable. It would be enough. The night before the wedding, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, second-guessing everything. What if he was wrong? What if showing up only made things worse? What if Serena was right, and people like him didn't belong in places like that? But then he thought about the alternative, staying home, pretending nothing had happened, teaching Lucas that some doors were meant to stay closed. He had made his choice. At 6 in the morning, Daniel got up, showered, shaved carefully. Lucas woke up while Daniel was buttoning his shirt. "Dad?" Lucas rubbed his eyes. "I have something to take care of. Are you working?" "Not exactly." Lucas frowned. "You look nice." Daniel smiled. "Thank you. Can I come?" "Not this time, buddy." Mrs. Chen arrived at 8 to watch Lucas. She didn't ask questions, just gave Daniel a long look and nodded. By 9:30, Daniel was standing outside the Royal Ashford Hotel. The building was enormous, marble columns, glass doors, a red carpet leading inside. People were arriving in expensive cars, men in tailored suits, women in dresses that probably cost more than Daniel's rent. He didn't belong here, but he was here anyway. Daniel took a breath, straightened his jacket, and walked inside. The Royal Ashford Hotel was everything Daniel expected and nothing he was prepared for. Chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Marble floors gleamed under soft lighting. Staff in crisp uniforms moved silently through the halls, carrying trays, adjusting flowers, attending to details Daniel couldn't even name. He followed the signs toward the ballroom. Guests clustered in small groups, holding champagne glasses, laughing at jokes Daniel couldn't hear. The women wore gowns in jewel tones, emerald, sapphire, deep red. The men wore suits that fit perfectly, their shoes polished to a mirror shine. Daniel felt the weight of every stare as he walked past. No one said anything, but everyone noticed. He moved toward the entrance of the ballroom. A young woman with a clipboard stood at the door, checking names. Name, please? Daniel Wright. She scanned the list, frowned, scanned again. I don't see. Try the end of the list, Daniel said quietly. She scrolled down, her expression shifted. Oh. Yes. You're here. She handed him a small card with a table number. Enjoy the ceremony. Daniel nodded, stepped inside. The ballroom was breathtaking, white and gold everywhere. Long tables draped in silk, centerpieces of white roses and orchids towering above crystal vases. A stage at the far end where the ceremony would take place, decorated with flowing fabric and ambient lighting that created an almost ethereal atmosphere. And at the center of it all, near the front, stood Serena Cole. She was stunning. A white gown that fit like it had been designed specifically for her, which it probably had. Her hair swept up, her makeup flawless. She was laughing at something Connor said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Then she looked up. Her eyes met Daniel's. For a moment, her expression didn't change. Just polite curiosity. Then recognition hit. Her smile faltered. Her eyes widened slightly. Daniel didn't look away. He walked calmly down the aisle between the tables, found his assigned seat near the back, and sat down. The ceremony was about to begin, and Serena Cole was no longer smiling. The ceremony started on time. The music played softly in the background. Guests turned their attention forward. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Serena walked down the aisle on her father's arm, every step measured and perfect, but her eyes kept drifting to the back of the room. To Daniel, the officiant began. Standard words about love, commitment, partnership. Serena and Connor exchanged vows they had written themselves, articulate, polished, emotionally precise. Rings were exchanged. Applause followed. And then it was done. The reception began immediately. Tables filled. Waiters appeared with trays of appetizers. Conversations resumed. Serena moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, smiling for photographs. But she couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Why had he come? Didn't he understand the invitation was a joke? Didn't he realize he was only making things worse for himself by being here? She excused herself from a conversation and walked toward the back of the room. Daniel was sitting quietly at his table, not eating, not drinking, just watching. Serena approached, her smile tight. Daniel, I'm surprised to see you. He stood. You invited me. I did. She glanced at his suit. Thank you. I wasn't sure you'd find something appropriate. Her tone was light, but the insult was clear. Daniel didn't react. It's a good suit, of course. Serena's smile widened. And it's wonderful that you could take time away from your work. I hope it wasn't too much trouble. It wasn't. Rachel appeared beside Serena, barely hiding her amusement. Oh my God. He actually showed. Rachel, this is Daniel, Serena said smoothly. He works at Cole Dynamics. Doing what? Maintenance. Rachel's smile sharpened. How nice. It's always good to have diverse perspectives at these things. Daniel looked at her. I clean the offices. Right. Rachel glanced at Serena. That must be so fulfilling. It pays the bills, Daniel said quietly. Serena leaned in slightly. And your son? Lucas, isn't it? Is he here? Daniel's expression didn't change. He's at home. Of course. Probably more appropriate. Serena tilted her head. I hope you're enjoying yourself. The food is excellent. The chef is Michelin-starred. I'm sure it is. Feel free to take home leftovers, Rachel added. We always have too much. Daniel didn't respond. Other guests were starting to notice. Conversation slowed, heads turned. Marcus joined them, his voice carrying. Serena, is everything all right? Perfectly fine, Serena said. Just welcoming one of our employees. Marcus looked Daniel up and down. Generous of you to invite. I believe in inclusivity, Serena replied, her tone bright. Daniel finally spoke. Should I leave? Serena blinked. Why would you leave? Because you didn't actually want me here. The words hung in the air. Serena's smile tightened. That's not true. Then why did everyone laugh when you invited me? Rachel's face went pale. Marcus looked away. Serena straightened. I think you're misunderstanding. I heard it, Daniel said. Through the door. All of you. The nearby tables had gone completely silent now. People were listening. Serena's voice dropped. You're making a scene. No, Daniel said quietly. I'm just standing here. Then perhaps you should sit down. I will. Daniel looked at her steadily. After you tell everyone why you really invited me, Serena's face flushed. I don't know what you're talking about. You wanted to see if I'd show up. You wanted to see if I'd embarrass myself. Maybe you thought it would be funny. Entertainment for your guests. Rachel stepped forward. That's not. It's okay, Daniel interrupted. I understand. People like me aren't supposed to be in places like this. We're supposed to stay in the background. Clean up after you. Stay invisible. Serena's voice shook slightly. You're being ridiculous. Maybe. Daniel's voice was calm, measured, without anger or bitterness. But I came anyway. Someone at a nearby table started to stand. A man in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that looked custom-tailored. Excuse me, he said loudly. But I'd like to know what's going on. Serena turned. Mr. Lawson. Henry, the man corrected. He looked at Daniel. Who are you? Daniel Wright. I clean the offices at Cole Dynamics. Henry's eyes narrowed. And Serena invited you to her wedding? Yes, sir. Daniel didn't answer. Henry turned to Serena. Why? Serena's smile was brittle. It was a gesture of goodwill. You thought it would be amusing, Henry said flatly. The room had gone completely silent. Serena's mouth opened, closed. Henry looked at Daniel. Did you know it was a joke? And you came anyway? Daniel hesitated. Then he said, Because I didn't want my son to think I was afraid. Henry stared at him for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. Henry Lawson. Daniel shook it. Henry turned back to Serena. I've known you for 5 years, Serena. I've invested in your company. I've recommended you to my colleagues. But this, he gestured around the room. This is beneath you. Serena's face had gone white. Henry, please. I'm going to leave now, Henry said. And I think you should apologize to this man. He walked toward the exit. One by one, other guests began to stand. Not all of them. But enough. Serena stood frozen as people filed past her, their faces carefully neutral. Rachel touched her arm. Serena, don't, Serena whispered. Daniel didn't move. He waited until the room had quieted again. Then he said, I'm sorry your wedding was ruined. Serena looked at him, her eyes filled with something close to desperation. Then why did you come? Because you invited me. But you knew. I knew exactly what it was, Daniel said. But I came anyway. Not to embarrass you, not to make a point. Just to show my son that when someone tries to make you feel small, you don't have to accept it. He turned to leave. Serena's voice stopped him. Wait. He looked back. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Daniel nodded once. Then he walked out. The ballroom buzzed with uncomfortable energy. People returned to their seats, but the conversations were different now. Quieter, more cautious. Connor appeared at Serena's side, his face carefully blank. What the hell just happened? Serena couldn't answer. Rachel tried to smooth things over, moving from table to table with apologies and reassurances. Just a misunderstanding. Everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. At a corner table, Elaine Parker sat with 3 other guests. She was 62, a former executive who had retired after decades in corporate leadership. She had been quiet during the confrontation, watching. Now she stood. "Excuse me," Elaine called out. The room quieted again. Serena turned. "Elaine, please, I need to say something," Elaine interrupted. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. She looked around the room. "I've known Serena for 8 years. I was her mentor when she first started Coal Dynamics. I taught her about leadership, about building a company, about treating people with respect." Her gaze landed on Serena, and tonight, I watched her forget every single lesson. Serena's face crumbled. "Elaine, that man showed more dignity in 10 minutes than this entire room has shown all night," Elaine continued. "He came here knowing he wasn't welcome, knowing he'd be mocked. And he came anyway, not out of pride, not out of revenge, but because he wanted his son to see him stand up for himself." She paused. "And what did we do? We laughed. We insulted him. We tried to humiliate him further. Because he was poor. Because he wore a second-hand suit. Because he cleans our offices while we sleep." The silence was absolute. Elaine set her napkin on the table. "I'm leaving, and I suggest the rest of you think about what kind of people you want to be." She walked out. 3 other guests followed her. Serena stood motionless in the center of the room. Connor touched her shoulder. "Serena," she pulled away. "Don't." Rachel approached. "We can fix this. We can." "Fix what?" Serena's voice cracked. "My wedding is falling apart. My guests are leaving. And it's my fault." "It's not. It is." Serena looked around the ballroom. At the decorations, the flowers, the carefully arranged tables, all of it felt empty now. She walked to the back of the room, to the table where Daniel had been sitting. His seat was empty. The place card still sat there, his name written in elegant script. Serena picked it up, stared at it. She had invited him as a joke, but he had shown up as a lesson, and she had been the one who failed it. Daniel didn't leave immediately. He stood in the hallway outside the ballroom, trying to process what had just happened. He hadn't planned to say anything, hadn't planned to confront Serena or make a scene. But when she approached him with that false smile, when Rachel made her comment about leftovers, something inside him had shifted. Not anger, not pride, just clarity. He had spent 3 years being invisible, 3 years accepting that his place was in the background, cleaning up after people who would never know his name. And tonight, for the first time, he had refused to disappear. He heard footsteps behind him. Henry Lawson approached, his expression thoughtful. That took courage. Daniel shook his head. "I didn't mean to ruin her wedding." "You didn't ruin anything. You just held up a mirror." Henry extended his hand again. "I meant what I said in there. You showed more integrity than most of the people in that room. I'm just a cleaner." "No," Henry said firmly. "You're a father. That's infinitely more important." Daniel looked at him. "Because I've been where you are," Henry replied. "Not exactly, but close enough. I grew up poor, worked my way through college cleaning hotel rooms. I know what it's like to be invisible." He handed Daniel a business card. "If you're ever looking for different work, call me. I own a logistics company. I could use someone with your work ethic." Daniel stared at the card. "I don't understand. You showed up when you knew you weren't wanted. You stayed calm when people tried to make you feel small. And you spoke up when it mattered." Henry smiled slightly. "That's the kind of person I want in my company. I don't have experience. You can learn experience. I can't teach character." Henry patted his shoulder. "Think about it." He walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone in the hallway. Daniel looked down at the card in his hand. Henry Lawson, CEO, Summit Logistics. A phone number, an opportunity. He slipped it into his pocket, took a breath, and headed for the exit. As he pushed through the front doors, the cool evening air hit him. The street was quieter now. The valet had stopped bringing cars around. Daniel walked to the bus stop, sat down on the bench. He had gone to the wedding expecting nothing, maybe hoping to prove something to himself. Definitely trying to set an example for Lucas, but he hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected people to listen, to stand up, to walk out. He hadn't expected an apology, and he definitely hadn't expected a job offer. The bus arrived. Daniel climbed on, paid his fare, found a seat near the back. As the city passed outside the window, he thought about what he would tell Lucas. Not everything. Lucas was 7. He didn't need to know all the details, but Daniel would tell him the truth, that sometimes people try to make you feel like you don't belong, like you're not good enough, like you should stay quiet and invisible. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can hide, or you can show up, not to fight, not to prove anything, just to stand there and refuse to disappear. That was dignity, and no one could take it away from you unless you let them. By the time Daniel got home, it was almost midnight. Mrs. Chen had stayed late, dozing on the couch while Lucas slept in the bedroom. She woke when Daniel came in, blinking at him. "You're back. Thank you for staying." She stood, gathered her things. "How did it go?" Daniel hesitated. "It went okay." She studied his face. "You look different. I feel different." She nodded, didn't ask more questions. Lucas was good. "He asked about you. What did you tell him? That you had something important to do?" She paused at the door. "Whatever happened tonight, I hope it was worth it." It was. After she left, Daniel locked the door, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark for a while. He thought about Serena, standing in the middle of her perfect wedding, watching it fall apart. He thought about Henry, offering him a business card and a chance at something better. He thought about the guests who stayed and the ones who left. But mostly, he thought about Lucas. Tomorrow morning, Lucas would wake up and ask questions. Where had Daniel gone? Why had he dressed up? And Daniel would tell him the truth, that someone had tried to make him feel small, and he had refused. Not with anger, not with violence, just with presence. He had shown up. He had stood there. He had spoken when it mattered. That was enough. Daniel went to the bedroom, looked at Lucas sleeping peacefully. His son was everything that mattered. Not the job. Not the building. Not Serena Cole or her wedding or any of it. Just this, a small boy who trusted him, who looked up to him, who learned how to be a person by watching what his father did. Daniel had taught him something tonight. Maybe not the lesson Serena intended, but the lesson Lucas needed. That dignity wasn't something you wore. It wasn't something you bought. It wasn't something that came with money or status or the right kind of suit. It was something you carried inside you, and no one could take it away. Daniel pulled the blanket over Lucas, kissed his forehead, and left the room. He changed out of the suit, hung it carefully back in the closet. Then he lay down on the couch, closed his eyes, and slept. The next morning, Serena sat alone in her apartment. Connor had left early. The wedding had continued after Daniel left, but half the guests departed early. The rest stayed out of obligation. She sat at her dining table, staring at the invitation she had sent Daniel. A single cleaner had walked into her wedding and exposed everything she had tried so hard to build. Except he hadn't exposed anything. He had just refused to accept the role she had assigned him. Someone who used people for entertainment, who built walls between herself and anyone she deemed beneath her, who mistook power for worth. Serena thought about Henry walking out, about Elaine's words, about the look in Daniel's eyes when he said he had heard them laughing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Call me when you can. We need to do damage control." Damage control. As if this were just a PR problem. But it wasn't. She had built her entire life on being better than other people. Smarter, more successful, more deserving. But Daniel had shown her the truth. She wasn't better. She was just luckier. And luck wasn't the same as worth. Serena didn't know if she could change. But for the first time in years, she understood that she needed to try. not because of the guests who left, not because of the damage to her reputation, but because somewhere in the city, a man she had tried to humiliate was waking up and making breakfast for his son, teaching him what it meant to be a good person, and Serena had no idea how to do that. Meanwhile, Daniel woke up, made breakfast for Lucas, and prepared for another day. The wedding felt distant already, like something that had happened to someone else. He thought about Henry's business card, still sitting on the dresser waiting. Maybe he would call, maybe he wouldn't. The choice was his alone. But either way, he had done what he set out to do. He had shown Lucas that dignity wasn't something you wore or bought. It was something you carried inside, and no one could take it away. Daniel sat down next to his son, helped him with his homework, and didn't think about weddings or ballrooms or anything beyond this moment, because this was what mattered. A father and his son, building a life together, one day at a time, with dignity